I only asked for one quiet day. I didn't know I was inviting the truth to bleed. If I'm honest, I thought love could be rented and returned before nightfall. Ezekiel Zeke Mercer stepped into the square as the church doors swung wide, a single envelope burning in his coat and a child's hand trembling in his. Naomi Carter stood beside him, shoulders squared, knowing the knife wasn't the sharpest thing in the room the whispers were. When the paper hit the table, winter held its breath. Ink, wax, a flower pressed too perfectly. Someone lunged. A body moved without thinking. Blood darkened wool, and the town learned how loud silence could be. Before the bells finished ringing, a ranch would choose its people, a sheriff would choose a side, and a little girl would decide who felt like home. Zeke would learn that hearts aren't hired, and that Christmas asks for courage, not quiet. One thing didn't fit. The seal on the deed was older than the law that claimed it. Stay with this story to the very end. Subscribe for more Western love tales. Drop your city in the comments and ride with us. The ledger snapped shut hard enough to echo off the dry goods shelves. Naomi Carter didn't flinch, but her shoulders tightened all the same. Horace Kellen's shadow filled the doorway, his boots planted like he owned the floor, and the air with it. "You've had your grace," he said, tapping the counter with one thick finger. "Christmas don't change debts." Naomi kept her voice level. "This one was never mine." Outside, a cold wind pushed dust down the street, rattling the window panes like knuckles. Somewhere a church bell marked the hour, soft, steady, reminding the town what season it was meant to be. Horace smiled without warmth. "Then you won't be needing my store," he said, "or this town's patience." She turned to go. That was when Ezekiel Mercer stepped into the doorway. He didn't rush, didn't raise his voice. He set one hand on the doorframe and waited for Horace to look at him. Zeke's coat was worn at the cuffs, his hat pulled low, snow dusting the brim. The kind of man people noticed only after he'd already decided something. "Ma'am," he said to Naomi, tipping his hat just enough. Then to Horace, "You finished?" Horace's eyes narrowed. "This don't concern you, Mercer." Zeke held the silence until it worked. "It does, if you're done." For a moment, the room felt like a held breath. Naomi could hear her own pulse. She could hear the bell again, farther off now, and thought, "Lord, I don't have strength for this." Horace scoffed and stepped aside. "You'll be hearing from me," he told her. "Soon." Naomi walked out into the cold without looking back. Zeke followed a pace behind. At the hitching rail, he stopped and cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said again, careful with the word, "I have a favor to ask." She turned, wary. "I don't sell what you're thinking." "I'm not buying," he said. "Not that." He took a breath. The kind a man takes when he's about to ask God for something he doesn't deserve. "I need someone to stand with me and my little girl. Just one day, Christmas service." Naomi laughed once, sharp. "You picked the wrong woman." "Maybe," he said. "But my daughter won't go alone. She won't go at all without a mother beside her." Her face closed. "I'm not anyone's wife." "I didn't say wife." He opened his coat just enough to show the corner of an envelope. "I'll pay. Enough for medicine." That landed. Naomi's jaw tightened. She looked past him toward the church roof catching the pale winter light. "Forgive me," she thought. and hated herself for it. One day, she said, no pretending beyond kindness, no touching. And after, this is done. Zeke nodded once. Yes, ma'am. They rode in silence. Snow began to fall in small, honest flakes, the kind that didn't ask permission. Zeke kept his eyes forward, hands steady on the reins. Naomi kept her coat pulled tight, counting the beats between hoof steps like prayers. The ranch house came into view. Dark windows, no smoke from the chimney. A place that had forgotten how to breathe. The door flew open. Papa! The little girl burst onto the porch barefoot, hair loose, cheeks flushed from the cold. Annie Mercer ran straight past her father and into Naomi's skirts, arms locking tight around her waist as if she'd been practicing for this her whole life. Naomi gasped. Her hands hovered, unsure, then settled, light, careful, on the child's shoulders. Annie looked up, eyes bright and certain. Miss Carter, she said clearly. My teacher. The world tipped. Zeke froze where he stood. The wind dropped. Even the snow seemed to pause. He stared at Naomi as if she'd stepped out of a memory he hadn't opened in years. You're her teacher, he said, the words leaving him before he could stop them. Naomi swallowed. Yes. Annie beamed, squeezing tighter. She said yes, she added, proud. She's going to stand with us. Zeke felt something crack. Not loud, not all at once. Just enough to let cold air in. I should have known, he thought. Lord help me, I should have known. He knelt then, slow, so he wouldn't scare his daughter. Annie, he said gently, your feet. Oh. She laughed, embarrassed, and wriggled back into the house. Naomi followed, one hand still hovering, ready. Inside, the kitchen smelled of nothing. No bread, no spice, just old wood and colder memories. Naomi reached for a shawl hanging by the door and wrapped it around Annie's shoulders without asking. Zeke watched. He didn't speak. He couldn't. Not when the smallest thing, kindness without terms, had walked into his house and refused to let go. I only asked for a day, he told himself. Outside, the church bell rang again. Christmas was coming. And with it, a choice he hadn't planned to make. Naomi did not take off her coat. She stood by the stove with her hands tucked beneath the wool, watching Annie shuffle around the kitchen, barefoot again, humming a tune that had no tune to it. The child stopped every few steps to look back at her, as if checking that Naomi was still real. Zeke poured water into the kettle and set it on the burner. The flame caught slow. He noticed everything now. The way Naomi kept herself near the door. The way Annie's shoulders loosened when Naomi nodded at her. I won't stay long, Naomi said quietly. Yes, ma'am, Zeke answered, just as quiet. He reached into his coat and placed the envelope on the table. He didn't push it toward her, didn't explain. Just set it there and stepped back, like a man laying down a weapon. Naomi stared at it. I said one day, she reminded him. I heard you. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. Inside, more than she'd expected. Enough to quiet the cough that had been rattling her aunt's chest all winter. Enough to buy time. God forgive me, she thought again, sharper this time. I'm not playing a role, she said. Not to her. Zeke met her eyes. I wouldn't ask that. Annie climbed onto a chair and swung her legs. Miss Carter, she said, careful, the way she spoke in class. "Can we make warm bread?" Naomi blinked. "We can try." The girl smiled as if a miracle had already happened. Naomi rolled up her sleeves. She moved slow, narrating each step the way she did with children who startled easy. Flour, water, yeast. Annie copied her exactly, dusting the counter with more enthusiasm than aim. Zeke leaned against the doorway and watched. That was when he felt it. Small, unwanted. Hope. The dough rose. The oven warmed. Annie laughed when flour smudged Naomi's cheek, then reached up and wiped it away with a seriousness that stilled the room. Zeke turned his face to the window. Later that night, Naomi found the shawl folded neatly on a chair by the fire. She hesitated, then draped it over her shoulders. The warmth surprised her. She stood there longer than she meant to, listening to the kettle sigh. Annie appeared with a box of crayons and a sheet of paper. "For Christmas," she said. Naomi knelt, bringing herself level. "For who?" "For us," Annie thought, then added, "If that's okay." Naomi nodded once. "That's okay." They drew in silence. A crooked house, a tall figure with a hat, a smaller one with braids. Annie colored the space between them yellow and pressed hard. "Home," she whispered. Naomi's throat tightened. She looked away before the child could see it. Zeke came back in as the bread cooled. He washed his hands, dried them slow. "I never pick her up from school," he said, as if confessing a sin. "I send Clara." Naomi didn't look up. "She watches more than she speaks." "I know. She trusts routines." Naomi paused. "And people who don't rush her." Zeke nodded. He had learned that the hard way. When Annie was finally tucked in, Naomi lingered in the hallway. The door was cracked just enough to let the lamplight spill out. Annie slept with one hand curled around the edge of her blanket, breathing even. Zeke stood beside Naomi, not touching. "You don't have to stay tomorrow," he said. "I can tell her." "No," Naomi said too quickly, then softened. "I'll stay. For the service." The words tasted like a promise she hadn't meant to make. In the sitting room, she noticed it. A faint red imprint on the edge of a book tucked into the shelf. Wax, shaped like a flower. Her breath caught. She knew that seal. Zeke followed her gaze. "That?" "Yes," she said. "Where did it come from?" He hesitated. "My wife." The words settled between them, heavy and unmovable. Naomi looked at the seal again, memory tugging sharp and sudden. Medicine arriving without a name. A kindness that had never asked to be known. She swallowed. "She helped my aunt," Naomi said. "Once. Maybe more." Zeke closed his eyes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire popped. Outside, the wind brushed the eaves. Annie's voice drifted down the hall, sleepy and sure. "Miss Carter?" Naomi answered at once. "I'm here." Zeke watched her go. "Lord," he prayed, not knowing to whom, "don't take this yet." In the morning, the bell would ring, and the town would look. Morning came thin and pale, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. Naomi woke before the bell. She sat at the small table, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone lukewarm, listening to the house find its shape. Floorboards settling, wind brushing the eaves. Somewhere beyond the walls, cattle shifting in the cold. Annie padded in quietly, dressed without being told. She stopped short when she saw Naomi, then smiled, small, careful, like she didn't want to break the moment. "Good morning, Miss Carter," she said. Naomi smiled back. "Good morning." Zeke watched from the doorway. He hadn't slept much. He hadn't trusted sleep to keep its distance. Naomi set the cup aside and knelt so she was level with the child. "We're going to church today," she said, slow and even. "There will be singing, people, noise." Annie nodded once, serious. "I can hold your hand." Naomi offered it without thinking. Annie took it, firm and sure, as if that was how it had always been. Zeke swallowed. They rode into town together. Naomi sat straight in the wagon, coat buttoned high, her gloved hand resting where Annie's fingers threaded through it. Zeke kept his eyes on the road, but every few steps of the horse, he checked the way Annie leaned, not toward him, but toward Naomi. It didn't hurt the way he thought it would. The church doors stood open. Warm air spilled out, carrying candle smoke and pine. Naomi paused at the threshold, feeling the eyes before she saw them. Heads turned. Whispers began, and then tried to pretend they hadn't. Zeke stepped down first and offered his hand, not to Naomi, to Annie. Naomi noticed. "Thank you," she thought. Inside, the pews creaked. Naomi guided Annie to the aisle seat, keeping her body between the child and the crowd. When the hymn started, Annie flinched. Naomi didn't hush her. She just leaned closer and hummed the tune under her breath, low enough that only one small girl could hear. The sound steadied Annie's shoulders. Zeke sat on the other side, hands folded, jaw tight. He could feel the looks pressing into his back. He could hear Horace Kellen's voice somewhere behind him, soft, smiling, saying the right words to the right ears. The pastor spoke of mercy, of keeping the small ones safe, of choosing light when darkness felt easier. Naomi bowed her head. "Please," she prayed, not for herself, just let her feel safe. When the service ended, the aisle filled. Naomi rose with Annie still holding tight. That was when Horace stepped into view, his hat in his hands, his smile practiced. "Well," he said pleasantly, "looks like you've found yourself a family." Naomi felt Annie's fingers curl harder. Zeke answered before she could. "We're leaving." Horace chuckled. "No harm meant. Just didn't expect." Naomi met his eyes. "I did," she said. The word landed clean. Horace's smile thinned. "We'll talk soon, Miss Carter." Outside, the cold felt sharper. Naomi exhaled, not realizing she'd been holding her breath. Annie tugged at her sleeve. "You did good," the child said solemnly. Naomi blinked. "Did I?" Annie nodded. "You didn't rush." Something loosened in Naomi's chest. They stopped by the small stand near the square, where candles were being sold for Christmas. Naomi bent to Annie's height. "We don't have to." "I want one," Annie said. "For home." Zeke paid without comment. At the wagon, Naomi tucked the candle carefully into her coat. Her hand brushed against something stiff inside her pocket, a folded paper she hadn't meant to bring. The corner of an old clipping. She pushed it deeper, out of reach of the day. Back at the ranch, Naomi helped Annie wash her hands. Soap, water, dry. Same order, same count. Annie watched her closely, then copied. Zeke chopped wood. The rhythm steadied him. Later, as Naomi reached for a book on the shelf, her finger caught the edge of wax again. The red mark, dulled with time. A flower pressed into memory. "Zeke," she said softly. He came at once. "Yes, ma'am." "My aunt, when she was worst, medicine came. No name, no bill." Naomi didn't look at him. "I think your wife sent it." Zeke's breath left him slow. He leaned a hand on the shelf. "She did that." Naomi closed her eyes. "She saved her." "So did you," he said, then stopped, corrected himself. "You're saving my girl." Naomi shook her head. "I'm just staying still." "That's more than most." Evening settled early. Naomi stood at the sink, drying her hands. Annie approached, holding the candle. "For tonight," she said. "So, Mama—" She stopped. Her face went still. Naomi crouched. "You can say Miss Carter." Annie nodded, chastened. "For you." Naomi took the candle. Her voice was steady. "Thank you." Zeke watched from the doorway. "I didn't ask for this," he thought. "But if it's a gift, don't let me ruin it." As Naomi set the candle on the table, the flame caught clean and bright. For a moment, the house looked like it remembered itself. Annie leaned against Naomi's leg. Naomi didn't move away. "Just for today," she told herself, and then quieter. "Lord, if this is all I get, let it be enough." Snow came heavier by afternoon, honest and quiet. It softened the fence lines and pressed the sound out of the yard until even the cattle moved like they knew better than to break it. Naomi tied her hair back with a strip of cloth she'd found in a drawer. She stood at the counter, sleeves rolled, the bowl steady beneath her hands. Annie watched from the chair, chin in her palms, counting each turn of the spoon like it mattered. "Slow," Naomi said. "We don't rush warmth." Annie nodded, solemn. She stirred slower. Zeke set kindling by the stove and stepped back. He didn't ask if Naomi needed help. He'd learned that kindness sometimes meant keeping your hands to yourself. Cinnamon warmed the room before the bread ever did. It crept into the corners and settled there, stubborn, like it meant to stay. Annie smiled without realizing it. When flour dusted Naomi's cheek, Annie reached up and wiped it away with two careful fingers. "There," she said. "Now it's even." Zeke turned to the window. He felt it then. Not joy. Not yet. Something smaller and more dangerous. Relief. They ate at the table with the lamp turned low. Annie broke her bread in neat halves and set one on Naomi's plate without being told. Naomi hesitated, then accepted it. The act felt like a vow she hadn't sworn. "Thank you," she said. Annie beamed. After, Naomi washed the bowl and dried it. Same order, same count. Annie copied. Zeke watched the rhythm set, the way a house learned a new heartbeat when someone listened. Later, Annie brought out the crayons again. She drew fast this time. A house with smoke curling from the chimney. A bell over the door. 3 figures inside the lines. "Is that me?" Zeke asked gently. Annie nodded. "That's Papa. That's you." She pointed to Naomi. "That's home." Naomi's breath caught. She looked away, just long enough to steady it. "Don't let her see," she told herself. Dusk came early. Naomi found the shawl again and wrapped it close. Zeke stood at the sink, scrubbing his hands, though they were already clean. "I should go before it gets dark," Naomi said, not looking at him. "Yes, ma'am," Zeke said. He meant it. He hated that he meant it. Annie appeared in the doorway holding a small candle. "For tonight," she said, "so it won't be loud." Naomi knelt. "Candles can flicker." "That's okay," Annie said. "I can hold it." Naomi took the candle and set it on the table. She struck the match. The flame caught clean, steady. Annie leaned into her leg, trusting the warmth. Zeke's eyes followed the light as if it were a sign he'd been missing. When it was time for bed, Naomi walked Annie down the hall. She paused at the door, hands hovering. "May I?" Annie nodded and crawled under the quilt. Naomi smoothed the fabric once. Just once. She hummed, low, almost nothing, until Annie's breathing evened. Zeke stood back, not crossing the threshold. He listened. The sound didn't hurt him the way he expected. In the quiet that followed, Naomi lingered by the bookshelf. Her fingers brushed the edge of a book and stopped. Red wax. Faded. A flower pressed into time. Her pulse quickened. Zeke came up behind her, leaving space. "That seal," he said softly. "My wife kept letters that way." Naomi swallowed. "Medicine came to my aunt last winter," she said. "No name, no bill. Just enough." Zeke closed his eyes. She did that. Naomi pressed her thumb to the wax without breaking it. "She saved her." "So did you," he said, then corrected himself again. "You are." Naomi shook her head. "I'm only standing still." "That's not nothing," he said. They didn't say her name. They didn't need to. The house knew. A knock came, sudden and sharp. Zeke stiffened. Naomi's shoulders tightened. Horace Kellen stood on the porch with snow on his hat and a smile he wore like a badge. "Evening," he said. "Smells festive." Zeke stepped outside and closed the door behind him. "This isn't the time," Zeke said. Horace shrugged. "There's never a good time to talk about what's owed." Naomi heard the word and felt the floor tilt. She stayed where she was. Horace's eyes flicked to the window, to the candlelight inside. "Enjoy it," he said. "Christmas makes people careless." Zeke held his ground. "Leave." Horace tipped his hat. "Soon." When Zeke came back in, Naomi was standing by the table, candle steady, Annie asleep down the hall. "I won't let him," Zeke said low. "Not tonight." Naomi nodded. "I won't stay forever," she said, just as low. "I can't." Zeke accepted it. He had to. Outside, the bell rang again, distant and sure. Christmas was close enough to touch. The house held its breath around the light. Just for today, Naomi told herself. Zeke watched the flame. "Just for tonight," he answered, without saying it. Neither of them moved away. The square filled before noon. Booths went up with ribbons tied too tight. Bread laid out like offerings. Candles lined in rows. Christmas had a way of pulling people close. Close enough to see. Close enough to judge. Naomi felt it the moment the wagon stopped. The looks didn't rush her. They waited. Zeke stepped down first. He lifted Annie and set her on the ground, then offered his hand, not to Naomi, to his daughter. Naomi noticed. She took her place beside Annie without being asked. "Ready?" she asked, low. Annie nodded and slipped her fingers into Naomi's glove. The grip was small and complete. Naomi breathed once. "Lord, give me steadiness." They walked. Whispers slid along their backs. Naomi heard her name once. Then the shape of it changed. She kept her eyes forward and her steps even. Annie leaned closer, trusting the nearness like it was a wall. At the edge of the square, Pastor Reed raised his hand for quiet. He spoke of gratitude, of keeping the small ones safe through the long winter, of mercy that did not keep accounts. Naomi bowed her head. Zeke did too. He wasn't sure who he was praying to anymore, but he knew what he was asking for. When the amen settled, people moved. Smiles appeared where curiosity had been. Horace Kellen stepped into the open as if the space belonged to him. "Well," he said pleasantly, hat in hand, "looks like the season has been generous." Annie's fingers tightened. Zeke answered before Naomi could. "We're busy." Horace's eyes slid to Naomi. "I won't take much of her time." Naomi felt the heat climb her throat. She met his gaze. "Say what you came to say." Horace smiled wider. "You owe, and Christmas doesn't erase ink." A few heads turned. Naomi felt the crowd draw closer, not with bodies, with attention. The old fear rose, sharp and familiar. If she ran, it would follow. If she stood, it would press. Zeke shifted, angling himself between Horace and the women he loved. "This isn't the place." Horace shrugged. "The place finds us." He produced a folded paper. Naomi recognized the weight of it before she saw the seal. Sheriff Rusk stood a few steps back, hands clasped, eyes anywhere but here. "Sign," Horace said softly. "And we're square." Naomi's mouth went dry. Annie looked up at her, reading the room with the accuracy children had when adults pretended not to notice. "No," Naomi said. The word landed clean. It surprised her. Horace leaned closer. "Think careful." "I have," she said. Her voice shook, but it didn't break. "I won't be owned." A murmur ran through the square. Horace straightened. "Then the law will decide." Sheriff Rusk shifted his weight. "Let's keep order," he said, weak. Zeke felt something hot rise behind his eyes. He wanted to end it the old way. He didn't. He looked down at Annie instead. "Sweetheart," he said, steady. "Look at me." She did. He waited until her breathing matched his. Naomi knelt so she was level. "Hold my hand," she whispered. Annie nodded. She held on. A bell rang from the far end of the square. Someone selling them for the season, testing the tone. The sound cut through the tension like a line. Horace took a step back, recalculating. "Enjoy the day," he said. "It won't last." He turned away. The crowd exhaled. People pretended to be interested in pies and candles again. Naomi stood slowly. Her knees trembled. Zeke placed himself beside her without touching. "I'm sorry," she said, too fast. "I didn't mean to." "You did right," he said. "That's enough." They left before the square could gather itself again. Back at the ranch, Naomi sat at the table and pressed her palms flat, grounding herself. Zeke poured water and set it before her. Annie watched, silent, absorbing. "Miss Carter," Annie said at last, "are you loud inside?" Naomi smiled, thin. "A little." Annie nodded. "We can be quiet together." Naomi closed her eyes. The fear eased just enough. Zeke stood at the window, jaw set. The paper Horace had waved burned in his mind. Ink, seals, law used like a blade. "I won't let them make you small," he thought. "Not her. Not my girl." Outside, the wind carried the sound of bells again, brighter this time. Christmas pressed closer, and with it, the pressure to choose. Naomi looked up. "I'll leave after tomorrow," she said. She needed to say it before courage failed. "Before this gets worse." Zeke didn't argue. He nodded once. The motion cost him more than he let show. That night, Naomi found the red wax again, the flower pressed into memory. She traced it with a careful thumb and felt the past stir, sharp and unfinished. Somewhere, a truth waited, and the season that loved light was about to demand it. Naomi packed slowly, not because there was much to take, just a change of clothes, her worn notebook, the folded clipping she kept hidden, but because speed would have felt like panic. She set each thing down, then lifted it again, as if weighing what it would cost to leave it behind. Down the hall, Annie sat on the floor lining wooden blocks in careful rows. When one tipped, she set it right. When another slipped, she steadied it with 2 fingers. Naomi watched the ritual and felt the pull of it in her bones. Zeke stood at the table with the folded paper Horace had waved in the square. He hadn't opened it. He knew what it would say. Ink had a way of pretending to be law when it wasn't. "I can pay it," he said at last. Naomi didn't turn. "No. I can end this before it starts." "You can't," she said. "Not without making it something else." He hated that she was right. She came to the table and laid her hands flat. "If you pay, I'm owned. If you don't, I'm hunted. Either way, Annie hears it at school. Either way, she learns something she shouldn't." Zeke's jaw tightened. "I won't let him take you." Naomi met his eyes. "Then don't try to buy me." The words landed harder than she meant. She softened them. "I know you're trying to help." "I know," he said. He didn't sound convinced. A knock came. 3 short raps, too precise to be neighborly. Zeke moved first this time, opening the door before Naomi could step back. Sheriff Gideon Rusk stood on the porch, hat in his hands, eyes tired. Snow clung to his coat like it didn't trust him either. "Zeke," he said. "Ma'am." Naomi nodded. "Sheriff?" Rusk cleared his throat. Horace filed the papers. Zeke didn't blink. "Already?" "It's legal," Rusk said, the word tasting bad. "On its face." "And underneath?" Naomi asked. Rusk looked away. "Underneath is harder." Zeke stepped forward. "So what do you want?" Rusk hesitated. "I want this to go quiet." Naomi felt the old heat rise. "It won't." Rusk met her eyes then. For a heartbeat, he looked ashamed. "Sign," he said softly. "Buy time." Naomi shook her head. "I won't trade my name for silence." Rusk nodded once like he'd expected it. "Then be careful." When he left, The house felt smaller. Naomi exhaled and pressed her fingers to her temple. Annie looked up from the floor. "Miss Carter?" Naomi knelt. "Yes, sweetheart." "Are we going away?" The question was gentle. That was the worst part. Naomi swallowed. "Maybe. Not today." Annie considered that. "I don't like maybe." "I know," Naomi said. "Me neither." That evening, Naomi rode out to check on her aunt. The cough had quieted some, thanks to medicine that still felt like a miracle. Her aunt squeezed her hand, eyes bright with the kind of gratitude that hurt. "It came again," she whispered. "Same as before. No name." Naomi's chest tightened. "When?" "Yesterday." Naomi rode back with the answer beating in her head. She dismounted and went straight to the shelf, to the book with the faded red wax. She pressed her thumb to the flower seal and remembered a winter night, a parcel left without a word, mercy given without witness. Zeke watched her from the doorway. "It was your wife," Naomi said. She didn't want credit. She wanted it done. Zeke closed his eyes. He saw his wife's hands, steady and sure, setting things right where she could. "You always did," he thought. "She wouldn't want you owned," he said. "No," Naomi agreed. "She'd want the truth." Zeke opened the paper then. He read once, then again. The seal wasn't Horace's. Not fully. The ink pressed too hard in places, like someone imitating a hand they didn't own. "There's something wrong," he said. Naomi nodded. "I've been carrying something too." She reached into her coat and drew out the folded clipping. A boy's face stared back, eyes bright and unfinished. The headline made Zeke's stomach twist. "I was the last one seen with him," Naomi said. "I was cleared, but not forgiven." Zeke folded the paper carefully. "That's not justice." "It's what passes for it," she said, "when the law belongs to one man." They stood there, the fire popping low. Annie's blocks clicked as she lined them again, listening without listening. "I'll leave before morning," Naomi said. "Before Horace decides to make this loud." Zeke shook his head. "No. I don't want Annie to pay for my fight." Zeke crouched so he was level with his daughter. "Annie," he said gently, "if Miss Carter goes, will that make you safer?" Annie looked at Naomi, then at him. She thought, long and careful. "No." Zeke stood. His voice was quiet, steady. "Then we don't run." Naomi felt the fear spike, and then something else beneath it. Resolve. "Lord," she prayed, "if I'm to stand, don't let me stand alone." Outside, the wind rose, carrying the distant ring of bells. Christmas was nearly here, and the law had shown its teeth. Zeke folded the paper and set it aside. "We find the truth," he said, "and we put it where it belongs." Naomi nodded. Her hands were shaking, but she didn't hide them. For the first time, leaving didn't feel like mercy. It felt like surrender. Night settled hard and early. Naomi sat at the table with her notebook closed, hands folded over it like a lid. The house held quiet the way a church did after everyone left. Too much space for one thought to echo. Annie padded in with her rabbit tucked under her arm. She stopped when she saw Naomi and smiled, soft and certain. "Miss Carter," she said, then hesitated. Her brow pinched, like she was reaching for a word that had moved. Naomi lifted her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart." Annie came closer. She didn't climb into Naomi's lap. She stood there, testing the floor with her toes. "If you stayed," she said slowly, choosing each word like it mattered, "would Christmas be quieter?" Naomi's breath caught. She heard her own heart, loud and wrong. Zeke stood in the doorway, unseen, every muscle tight. He told himself not to step in. This wasn't his sentence to interrupt. Naomi knelt so she was level with Annie. "Christmas can be loud," she said gently, "but we can make a small place inside it." Annie nodded, thinking. Mama used to do that. The word landed. Naomi felt it like a blade slipping between ribs. Clean, sudden, unforgiving. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She kept her hands where Annie could see them. "I didn't mean," Annie said quickly, eyes wide. "I mean, it's okay," Naomi said, too fast. She slowed herself. "You didn't do anything wrong." "But if you stayed," Annie pressed, voice barely a whisper now, "you could be my—" Zeke stepped forward. "Sweetheart," he said, soft. "Bedtime." Annie looked between them, confusion tugging at her mouth. "Okay," she said, obedient even in hope. She turned back to Naomi and held out the rabbit. "For quiet." Naomi took it. Her fingers shook. Zeke tucked Annie in while Naomi stood in the hall, the rabbit pressed to her chest like an anchor. She heard Zeke's voice, low, steady, counting breaths the way he always did. She heard the mattress sigh as Annie settled. When the door closed, Naomi didn't wait. She went back to the table and opened her notebook. She wrote one line, then crossed it out, wrote another. Her hand cramped. The words refused to line up into mercy. "I can't do this to her," she thought. "I can't leave and teach her that people say forever and mean winter." Zeke came in and stopped when he saw the notebook open, the bag by the door. "You're leaving," he said. Not a question. Naomi nodded. "Before morning." His jaw worked. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. That hurt worse than either. "She said it," Naomi continued, voice steady by force. "Not because she meant to. Because she trusts me." She looked up and trust breaks louder than anger. Zeke swallowed. "I won't ask you to stay." "I know." Naomi's mouth twisted. "That's why I can't." She packed what little she had. The notebook, the clipping, the shawl, then stopped and set it back down. Some kindnesses shouldn't be carried away like spoils. Zeke watched from the sink, hands braced, as if holding himself in place. "I'll go before she wakes," Naomi said. "She won't see me leave." Zeke closed his eyes. He saw another morning, another door, another absence that never explained itself. He opened them again. "I'll saddle your horse," he said. Outside, snow whispered across the yard. Zeke worked by lantern light, movements practiced, quiet. Naomi stood on the porch, breathing the cold like penance. Inside, a small sound, the creak of a board. Annie stood in the doorway, hair loose, eyes bright with sleep. "Miss Carter?" she asked. Naomi froze. Zeke turned, heart hammering. "Annie," he said gently, "back to bed." Annie shook her head. She walked to Naomi and took her hand. just took it, like there was no question to ask. She looked up, serious as Sunday. "Are you going away forever?" she asked. Naomi knelt. The rabbit slid from her arm to the floor. "No," she said, and hated herself for the word. "I'm going away so you won't hurt." Annie frowned. "That doesn't make sense." Naomi's voice broke. She steadied it. "Sometimes grown-ups make choices to keep little hearts safe." Annie thought. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to Naomi's. "Please don't," she said, very softly. "I don't like alone." The room went still. Zeke felt something tear. "Not again," he prayed. "Lord, not like this." Naomi closed her eyes. For one treacherous moment, she wanted to stay. Wanted it so badly it frightened her. She kissed Annie's hair and stood. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant." Annie let go. That was the worst of it. She didn't cry. She stepped back, small shoulders straightening, like she'd learned something hard and permanent. "Okay," she said. Naomi took the bag. Zeke opened the door. Outside, the cold cut clean. Naomi mounted without looking back. She couldn't. If she did, she would fail. Zeke stood on the porch until the sound of hooves thinned and vanished. He pressed his fist to his mouth. Inside, Annie sat on the floor with her blocks, lining them again. One tipped. She set it right. Another slipped. She steadied it. "Papa?" she said quietly. "Yes, sweetheart." "Is quiet gone?" Zeke crossed the room and knelt, pulling her close. "No," he said, though his voice shook. "We're going to find it." Later, alone in the barn, Zeke leaned against the stall and let the lantern light blur. The words he hadn't said crowded his chest. I should have stopped her. He remembered the night of the storm, the promise he'd made to a woman who trusted him to choose better next time. Snow fell harder, covering tracks. The bell rang once, distant and thin. Zeke straightened. "I won't lose another," he said to the empty air. "Not to fear." And with that, the night shifted, quietly, the way it always did before a reckoning. The lantern guttered as Zeke shut the barn door. He stood there longer than he needed to, breath fogging, listening to the horses shift in their stalls. The quiet pressed in, not the kind that soothed, the kind that accused. He set the lantern down and braced both hands on the rail. Snow whispered against the roof. For a moment, the years folded in on themselves. It was winter again. Worse than this one. The wind had screamed like it knew what it was taking. He could smell blood and soap and the sharp iron of fear. He could hear the doctor's boots on the floor, the way they slowed before he spoke. "Don't let her grow up alone," his wife had whispered, fingers cold in his palm. Not a plea, a charge. Zeke dragged a hand over his face. "I failed you," he said to the stall. The horse flicked an ear, patient. He straightened. Failure was a thing that happened when a man stopped. He hadn't stopped yet. Inside the house, the lamp by the window still burned. Annie's boots sat where she'd kicked them off, toes dusted with flour from earlier. Zeke picked them up and set them straight. He didn't know why. He just needed one thing to be right. On the table lay the folded paper Horace had flashed in the square. Zeke opened it at last. He read once. Then again. The words were clean enough. The seal wasn't. He knew seals. He knew hands. This one pressed too hard in places, like a man signing with borrowed authority, ink trying to pass for truth. Zeke pulled the book from the shelf, the one Naomi had touched. He turned it over. Red wax faded to the color of old roses, a flower pressed into time. Lord, he prayed, not loud. If you put this here, show me how to use it. He gathered his coat and stepped into the night. The first door he knocked on belonged to Doc Harlan Pike. The doctor answered with a candle in hand, hair uncombed, eyes already searching. She left, Zeke said. Doc nodded once. I figured. I need your eyes, Zeke said. On paper, on ink. Doc stepped aside. Come in. By the time Zeke reached Pastor Reed's parsonage, the snow had thickened. The pastor listened without interrupting, fingers steepled, gaze steady. You're asking me to stand where it won't be comfortable, Reed said. Zeke met his eyes. I'm asking you to stand where it's right. Reed took his coat from the hook. Mrs. Calloway's lamp burned late, as it always did. She read the seal and sucked in a breath. That flower, she said. I've seen it before. Zeke waited. On letters, she said, from your wife, when she helped folks who couldn't be helped any other way. Zeke felt the ground firm beneath his boots. Not hope. Direction. They split then, quietly, with purpose. Zeke took the road toward town. The others took their own. At dawn, Naomi reined in at the edge of the creek. Her horse drank. She did not. Her hands shook. She pressed them to her thighs and counted breaths. Leaving had been the right choice. She told herself that until the words dulled. I didn't ask for this, she thought. I asked for quiet. She reached into her pocket and felt the folded clipping. The boy's face stared back from memory, bright and unfinished. She closed her eyes. Behind her, hooves broke the hush. Naomi turned, heart leaping, then sinking when she saw it wasn't Annie. Zeke drew up short, breath coming fast. Naomi, he said. She stayed mounted. You shouldn't be here. I know. He held out the book. The wax caught the light. Her breath left her in a rush. Where did you get that? You know where. She nodded once. Your wife. Yes. Naomi's shoulders slumped, the fight running out of her all at once. She sent medicine, she said. More than once. No name. No bill. Her voice cracked. She saved my aunt. Zeke swallowed. She'd want this finished. Naomi looked past him, toward the thin line of smoke rising from town. Horace won't stop. He will, Zeke said, with witnesses. She laughed, short and tired. You think the law will listen to me? I think the law listens when enough good people refuse to look away. Naomi stared at the seal again. Memory stirred, parcels left in snow, a kindness that had never asked to be seen. I have something, she said slowly. She reached into her coat and drew out the clipping. They never forgave me. Zeke took it gently. Then we don't ask for forgiveness, he said. We ask for truth. A bell rang from town, faint and insistent. Naomi looked down at her hands. If I go back, it gets louder. It does, Zeke said, but not alone. She searched his face for bargains, found none. I can't do this, she thought, and then quieter. I can. She swung down from the saddle. Back at the ranch, Annie sat at the table lining her blocks. She stopped when she heard boots. She looked up. Zeke knelt. Sweetheart, he said, we're going to tell the truth today. Annie considered that. Is it loud? Maybe. She slid off the chair and took his hand. I can hold yours. Zeke felt his throat close. He nodded. Naomi stood in the doorway, snow in her hair, fear and resolve braided tight. Annie looked at her and didn't run. She stepped closer. Miss Carter, she said, you came back. Naomi knelt and took her hand. Yes. The house seemed to lean in, listening. Outside, the wind carried the sound of bells, clearer now. Christmas was close enough to demand light. Zeke picked up the book. Naomi folded the clipping. Annie held on. Together they turned toward town. If this breaks me, Naomi prayed, let it save her. And with that, the quiet changed its shape into something that could be used. The church doors were already open when they reached the square. People gathered the way they always did when something felt off. Too early, too quiet. Too many eyes pretending to mind their own business. Naomi felt the weight of it press between her shoulder blades as they stepped down from the wagon. Zeke didn't rush. He set Annie on the ground and waited until she found Naomi's hand. The grip came quick, certain. Inside, the pastor's table stood bare except for a Bible and a single candle. Naomi smelled wax and pine and the faint sweetness of bread left cooling somewhere nearby. Christmas had learned how to wait. Horace Kellen arrived smiling. He took the aisle like it belonged to him, hat off, voice smooth. Pastor, he said, nodding. I heard there was trouble. Pastor Reed looked from Horace to Zeke. There is, he said, and it's loud enough to need daylight. A murmur ran through the pews. Horace's eyes flicked to Naomi. Miss Carter, he said, pleasant, we can do this quietly. Naomi felt her heart pound, hard and fast. She looked down at Annie. The child nodded once as if to say, I'm here. Naomi stepped forward. I won't sign, she said. Horace chuckled. You don't have to. The law will. Zeke set the book on the table. The sound was small. It landed anyway. Before you do, Zeke said, voice steady, look at the seal. Horace's smile faltered. Just a breath. Enough. Doc Harlan leaned in, peering at the wax. This is older than your paper, he said, and pressed by a different hand. Mrs. Calloway stepped closer. I've seen that flower, she said, on letters that brought food, medicine, help, from Zeke's wife. The room shifted. Naomi's chest tightened. She reached into her coat and brought out the folded clipping. Her fingers shook. She didn't hide it. I was blamed, she said. Her voice was quiet. It carried anyway. For a boy who went missing. I was cleared, but I was never forgiven. She swallowed. Because forgiveness would have meant questions. Horace's jaw tightened. This is a witch hunt. Naomi looked at him. You took land, she said. Water. You buried it in ink and called it law. She opened the book. Inside, tucked where a child would never look, lay the torn edge of a deed. The wax matched. The flower lined up, clean and exact. A gasp moved through the room. "That land belonged to my family," Naomi said. "And to others. It paid for your fences, your silence." Horace stepped forward. "Enough." Zeke didn't move. "My wife found it," he said. "She tore it in two so it couldn't be used against anyone until it could be used for everyone." Horace's eyes cut to Sheriff Rusk. The sheriff shifted. He looked at the deed, at the wax, at the faces watching him. "This needs holding," he said, and the word holding sounded like a decision he hadn't meant to make. Horace lunged. It happened fast, too fast for words. His hand shot out, not for the book, for Annie. Naomi moved without thinking. She stepped between them, one arm sweeping Annie back, the other bracing. Horace's grip caught her sleeve. The knife flashed, just the threat of it, and pressed cold against Naomi's ribs. The room went silent. "Let her go," Zeke said, calm as a held breath. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach. He looked at Annie instead. "Sweetheart, eyes on me." Annie's hands shook. She did as she was told. Naomi felt the blade, felt fear spike bright and sharp, and then something steadier beneath it. Resolve. "If this breaks me," she prayed, "let it save her." "I'm not signing," she said, even now. "I'm finished being quiet." Horace hissed, tightening his grip. "You think they'll choose you?" "They already did," Naomi said. A chair scraped. Mrs. Calloway stepped forward. Then another voice. Then another. The pews stirred like a waking thing. "Enough," Pastor Reed said, loud now. "Put it down." Sheriff Rusk drew his weapon, not toward Naomi, toward Horace. His hand trembled. He held it anyway. "Let her go." For a moment, it balanced on a knife's edge. Then Horace released her. The knife clattered to the floor. Naomi stumbled. Zeke caught her, just for a second, then let go. Annie ran into Naomi's arms, burying her face. "It's all right," Naomi whispered, rocking her. "I'm here." Horace backed away, hands up, anger burning through the polish. Sheriff Rusk closed the distance and snapped the cuffs on. The sound rang louder than the bell ever had. Outside, the winter light spilled in through the open doors, pale and honest. The pastor closed the book over the deed and laid his hand on it. "The truth has been waiting," he said. "Now it's here." Naomi looked at the table, at the wax, at the flower that had held its shape through years of quiet courage. Zeke stood beside her, not touching. His voice was low. "You did it." She shook her head. "We did." Annie looked up, eyes wet but bright. "Is it quieter now?" Naomi pressed her forehead to the child's hair. "It will be." Outside, a bell rang, clearer than before. Christmas stepped closer, not asking for silence anymore. And for the first time, Naomi felt the weight on her back shift. Not gone, but shared. They did not cheer. Not at first. The room stayed quiet in the way a place does when it has just watched itself choose. Naomi felt the aftermath in her bones, shaking that came late, like thunder after lightning. Sheriff Rusk guided Horace toward the door. Horace's boots dragged once, twice. He looked back at Naomi with something like disbelief. Then the cuffs caught the light, and the moment closed around him. Annie clung to Naomi, fingers buried in her coat. Naomi rocked her, slow, and counted. 1, 2, 3. She breathed where Annie could feel it. Zeke stood a step away, hands open, as if anything sudden might break the air again. "You're hurt," he said. Naomi glanced down. Blood had darkened the fabric near her ribs, small but real. "It's nothing. It's something," he said, gentle and firm all at once. Doc Harlan was already there, pressing cloth to the cut. "She'll need stitches," he said. "She'll live." Naomi closed her eyes. "Thank you," she prayed, and meant it for more than one thing. They moved her to the side room. Annie didn't let go. Zeke followed and stopped at the threshold, the way he always did when he wasn't sure he had the right. "Papa?" Annie said, voice thin. Zeke came in then. He knelt. He placed his hand over Naomi's, only where Annie could see it, and kept it there. Naomi felt the steadiness pass through her like a borrowed pulse. "I thought he was going to—" Annie began. Naomi shook her head. "He didn't," she said. "And he won't." "How do you know?" Annie asked. Naomi met her eyes. "Because people saw." Outside, voices rose, questions now, not whispers. The pastor spoke. Mrs. Calloway answered. Names were said out loud. Ink was named what it was. The town leaned closer, not to judge, but to witness. Doc finished and tied off the bandage. "No lifting," he told Naomi. "No heroics." Naomi smiled faintly. "I'm finished with those." When they stepped back into the main room, the candle still burned on the table. The deed lay beneath the closed Bible, held in place by the pastor's hand like a promise. Sheriff Rusk cleared his throat. "This will go to the county," he said. "Today." A murmur of assent followed him out. Naomi felt the release then. Not relief exactly. Space. The kind that comes when a weight moves just enough to let you stand straighter. She turned to Zeke. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for bringing this to your door." Zeke shook his head. "It was already here." Annie tugged Naomi's sleeve. "Is Christmas still coming?" Naomi laughed, surprised by it. "Yes." "Good," Annie said, "because we need a bell." Zeke blinked. "A bell?" "For the door," Annie said, "so it won't be loud." Naomi looked at Zeke. He nodded, the decision already made. They left together. The square had changed. People met Naomi's eyes now. Some nodded. Some said her name. One woman pressed a loaf of bread into her hands without a word. Naomi accepted it, the weight warm and steady. At the wagon, Zeke paused. He reached into his coat and took out the envelope, the one that had started everything. He held it out. Naomi didn't take it. "I can't," she said. Zeke tore it clean in two and let the pieces fall to the dirt. "Then we won't," he said. His voice carried, but he wasn't speaking to the square. "I won't rent a heart for a day. If I'm here for good." The words settled. Naomi felt them like a hand at her back. Annie grinned, unabashed. "That's good," she said. "That's very good." Back at the ranch, the house seemed larger, or maybe lighter. Naomi sat at the table while Zeke made soup, the smell of onions and broth threading the rooms together. Annie fetched the small bell from the cupboard, brass, dulled with time. Zeke climbed the step stool and fixed it above the door. He rang it once. The sound was clear, not sharp, Safe, Annie declared. Naomi watched, chest tight with something that wanted to be joy and wasn't finished becoming it. That night, the wind rose and fell. Naomi slept on the couch, bandage warm beneath her ribs. She woke once to the sound of the bell, just a brush of air, and felt her body ease instead of jolt. In the early hours, Zeke sat at the table with the deed framed and leaned against the wall. He didn't touch it. He didn't need to. He closed his eyes and prayed without words. I chose right, he thought. This time. Morning came pale and honest. Annie padded in and climbed onto Naomi's lap without asking. Naomi wrapped her arms around her, careful of the bandage. Stay, Annie said. Not a question. Naomi looked at Zeke. He didn't answer for her. I will, Naomi said. And for the first time, the word didn't feel like a promise she'd have to break. Outside, the bell rang once more, answering a breeze. Christmas waited, not with demands, with room. And in that room, something mended, quietly, the way it always did when truth had been allowed to finish its work. Snow softened the world overnight. It did not erase what had happened. It only laid it gently, like a clean sheet over a hard bed. Naomi woke to the bell's quiet note as the door shifted with the morning wind. The sound no longer startled her. It anchored her. She sat up slowly, mindful of the bandage. The house smelled of coffee and bread warming. Ordinary things. Sacred things. Zeke stood at the counter, sleeves rolled, hands steady. He turned when he heard her breathe. You should still be resting, he said. I am, Naomi replied. This is rest. Annie appeared between them, hair sleep-tangled, eyes bright. She carried the framed paper with both hands like it weighed something important. Papa, she said, where does this go? Zeke looked at the deed, edges torn once, now joined under glass, the red wax flower sealed whole again. Where it can be seen, he said, so we don't forget. Naomi watched him choose the wall by the door. Not the study, not the bedroom, the place everyone passed. Annie nodded. So the bell can see it too. Zeke smiled. A real one, unguarded. He lifted Annie to hammer the last nail. She tapped once, careful, and beamed like she'd rung a church bell herself. Later, the knock came. Sheriff Rusk stood on the porch, hat in hand, eyes clear for the first time in a while. County's taking it up, he said. The land, the water. Horace won't be walking back into town. Naomi held still, listening for the old fear. It didn't rise. Thank you, she said. Rusk nodded. I should have done it sooner. Yes, Naomi agreed. Not cruel, not kind, just true. When he left, Zeke poured coffee and slid a cup toward Naomi. She wrapped her hands around it and felt the warmth settle. I need to say something, Zeke said. Naomi looked up. He waited until Annie was occupied lining her blocks. Order before courage. I won't ask you to stay because it's easier, he continued, or because the town expects it, or because a little girl wants it. He swallowed. I want you to choose, free and clear. Naomi's heart thudded. She thought of the envelope torn in the square, of the blade at her ribs, of the bell's steady note. I am choosing, she said. Zeke nodded once, accepting the weight of it. He reached into the drawer and took out the remaining half of the torn envelope, the one he'd kept back, just in case. He held it, then tore it again and again until there was nothing left but scraps. "I don't rent, love," he said quietly. "Not for a day. Not ever." The words settled between them like a line drawn with care. Naomi felt the old instinct to step back. She didn't. "Then I'll stay," she said. "As myself. A teacher. A woman who can say no and yes." Zeke met her eyes. "That's the only way I know how." Annie looked up from the floor. "Is this the part where we're a family?" Naomi knelt. "Families choose each other," she said. "Every day." Annie considered that, then smiled. "Okay." That afternoon, the town came by in ones and twos. Not apologies, offerings. Firewood stacked neat. A jar of honey. A book for the schoolroom Naomi hadn't opened yet. Naomi thanked them and set each thing in its place. At dusk, Pastor Reed stopped at the gate. "Christmas Eve service," he said, "if you're willing." Naomi looked at Zeke. He waited. "We'll come," she said. Night fell. Naomi sat at the table grading papers by lamplight. Annie curled beside her coloring bells. Zeke fixed a loose board by the door and rang the bell once to test it. The sound was clear, steady. Naomi felt it then. Not the rush of a miracle, but the slow, honest lift of hope. The kind that didn't promise an ending. Only a way forward. She closed her eyes for a breath and prayed. Not to be spared pain, but to be worthy of what had been given. When she opened them, Annie was watching her. "What are you asking God for?" the child asked. Naomi smiled. "Courage." Annie nodded. "He's good at that." Outside, the snow kept falling, gentle and sure. Inside, the house learned a new quiet, one that made room for laughter without fearing the sound. And for the first time since she could remember, Naomi did not brace for leaving. She leaned into staying. Spring did not arrive all at once. It came the way healing did, uneven, patient, honest. Snow loosened its grip in patches. Mud showed where green meant to be. The bell over the door rang more often now, not from wind, but from people learning the sound was safe. Naomi stood at the long table by the window, sleeves rolled, chalk dust on her fingers. 3 children sat across from her, Annie in the middle, feet swinging, eyes intent. Naomi tapped the bell once to begin. The sound was soft. The room settled. "Letters first," she said. Annie grinned and leaned in. Zeke watched from the doorway, hat in his hands. He didn't hover. He didn't interrupt. He let the lesson belong to her. The ranch had learned new rhythms, chores that bent around school hours, quiet that held laughter without shushing it. When the children left, Naomi wiped the table and stacked the slates. Zeke came in with a crate of apples and set it down. "County sent word," he said. "The water rights are back where they belong." Naomi nodded. The news felt less like victory and more like breath returned. "Good." Annie burst in from the yard, hair wind-tangled, holding a bunch of wildflowers. "For the bell," she announced. Naomi laughed and took them. "The bell doesn't need flowers." "It likes them," Annie insisted. They fixed the flowers beneath the frame that held the deed, glass catching the light, the red wax flower sealed and whole. The bell rang once as Zeke closed the door. The sound no longer measured fear. It marked arrival. That evening, they ate on the porch, soup steaming, bread broken clean. Zeke said grace without ceremony, thanking God for hands that stayed and truth that held. Naomi bowed her head and felt the words settle where they needed to. After, Annie drew at Zeke's boots with a stick, careful circles in the dirt. Naomi leaned against the post, watching the sun lower itself into gold. "Will it always be like this?" Annie asked. Naomi knelt. "It will change," she said, "but we'll change together." Annie accepted that and went back to her circles. Later, when the sky cooled to blue, Zeke brought out a small package. He didn't make a speech. He handed it to Naomi. Inside, a bell, smaller than the one on the door, polished, new. "For the schoolroom," he said. "So every place you teach has a way to be quiet." Naomi touched it, surprised. "Thank you." He nodded. That was enough. They rang the bells together, once, then twice, testing the harmony. The sounds met and held. "This is home," Naomi thought, and didn't flinch from the word. When night came, Annie slept fast and deep. Naomi sat at the table grating by lamplight. Zeke mended tack nearby. The bell shifted with the breeze and rang soft. Neither of them startled. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment. "Lord," she prayed, "keep us brave when it gets loud again." Zeke set down his needle and looked at her. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He had learned that some answers were built, not spoken. In the morning, Annie drew a new picture. 3 figures under a roof, a bell at the center, lines steady, colors bright. "Family," she said, simple and sure. Naomi pinned it by the door, beneath the deed. Zeke rang the bell once, smiling. Outside, the fields stretched wide and green, honest work waiting. Inside, the quiet held, room enough for laughter, for lessons, for prayers spoken low. From a single question asked in winter, "Can you be my date for one day?" a life had answered back, not with promises borrowed, but with days chosen. And the bell kept ringing. Spring came the way healing always does, quietly, without asking permission. It came in small mercies, a bell that no longer startled, a table that stayed full, a child who slept through the night and woke ready to learn. Zeke never forgot the winter that tested him, and Naomi never forgot the fear that taught her courage. They didn't erase the past. They learned how to live with it, honestly and together. Some nights the wind still rattled the eaves. Some mornings memories arrived unannounced. But the house held, the door opened, the bell rang clear, and Annie laughed, an easy sound that told the truth better than any paper ever could. Faith didn't make things perfect. It made them possible. If this story warmed your heart, perhaps it stirred a memory of your own, of choosing kindness when it cost something, of standing still long enough for love to find you, of believing that it's never too late to begin again. We'd love to hear what this story meant to you. Please take a moment to like this video if it touched you. Subscribe for more gentle Western love stories, and leave a comment with the name of your city. Your words help these stories travel, quietly, faithfully, into other homes that may need them.